So, you've just finished Resident Evil 9 and you're sitting there like, now what? Grace had you checking every corner, counting every bullet, dreading every door. Leon had you parrying tyrants and fighting your way through the ruins of Raccoon City. Requiem gave you both flavours of horror in one game, and nothing else feels like it's going to hit the same. Except these 10 games will, and I guarantee you haven't played most of them. We're splitting this game the same way Capcom split RE9. Survival horror for the Grace fans, action horror for the Leon fans, so let's get into it. You know how Grace explored Rose Hill Chronic Care Centre, a creepy medical facility full of body horror and locked doors? Tormented 2 is basically that for 12 straight hours. You play as Caroline Walker, investigating a sinister hospital turned mansion with interconnected rooms, brutal puzzles, and combat that punishes you for wasting ammo. The first game came out in 2021 and was already a faithful throwback, but the sequel, released in late 2025, improved on everything: better controls, better level design, and some actual nasty enemy encounters. It sold over 100,000 copies and got very positive reviews on Steam. But because it's an indie with no marketing budget, most people have no idea it exists. If you miss the days of exploring one massive building in Resident Evil, meticulously unlocking shortcuts and solving puzzles to progress, this is your game. It's the closest thing to the modern RE mansion crawl that isn't actually made by Capcom. If Grace's sections made you think, I want more of this but with a Blade Runner vibe, Hollowbody is the answer. Set in a walled-off section of a post-apocalyptic British city, you play as Mika searching for her missing partner inside a quarantine zone. Fixed camera angles, limited ammo, inventory management, eerie exploration. All the classic survival horror boxes are checked. But this world is cyberpunk. Neon signs flicker over ruined streets. Your flashlight cuts through industrial fog. The whole thing feels like a lost PS2 horror game that has somehow made it to 2024. Here's what makes this pick special. It was made by one person, Nathan Hamley, under the studio named Headwire Games. He built the entire experience solo. PC Gamer compared it to an English cyberpunk Silent Hill, and it currently sits with an overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam. It's about 4 to 6 hours long, which means zero filler. Every room matters, every scare earns its place. This is the closest game on this list to Resident Evil 9's actual DNA. Echoes of the Living drops you in a zombie-infested city and hands you the classic survival horror toolkit: fixed camera angles, item boxes, limited saves, scarce ammo, and a map that opens up as you find keys and solve puzzles. If you played the original RE2 or RE3, you already know the rhythm. The difference is this game was built by a tiny team under the name Moon Glit, and it launched in early access on Steam in Halloween 2025. Now, early access does mean it's still being updated, but what's there right now is polished, atmospheric, and actually difficult survival horror experience with that Raccoon City energy you can't get anywhere else. The zombie encounters are tense, the environments are thick with fog and dread, and the pacing feels like Capcom circa 1998. If you loved RE9 specifically because it reminds you of older games, Echoes of the Living is the indie that's carrying that torch right now. If you loved Grace's sections, the scavenging, the dread, the feeling that your inventory is never big enough, SIGNALIS is the game you need to play next. You're a technician android called Elster on a frozen mining planet. Your ship crashes, your partner is missing, and you transcend into this brutalist underground facility that gets more disturbing every floor. It plays like a classic Resident Evil from a top-down perspective. Fixed shooting angles, backtracking through interconnected maps, and an inventory limited to 6 slots. 6! You'll be making hard choices about what to carry with you at all times. But what makes SIGNALIS special isn't just the mechanics, it's the atmosphere. This game bleeds psychological horror in a way that reminded me more of Silent Hill than Resident Evil, and the story underneath is actually one of the most emotional narratives I've seen in the genre. It was developed by a 2-person team called Rose Engine, came out in 2022, and most people completely missed it. If Grace's survival horror had you hooked, SIGNALIS is mandatory. This one looks cute. It is not cute. Crow County is set in 1990 in an abandoned theme park called, well, Crow County. You play as Mara Forrest trying to find the park's missing owner, and what starts as a charming retro-starred exploration game turns into an actual unsettling survival horror with mutated creatures, scarce resources, and puzzles woven into every attraction. The visual style borrows from the PS1 era RPGs. Think the overworld of Final Fantasy VII, but filled with things that want to kill you. You aim from an isometric perspective, ammo is tight, and the map is dense enough that you'll be finding new shortcuts and secrets for hours. The Guardian called it breathtaking, and Rock Paper Shotgun described it as their first Resident Evil, which is a perfect way to put it. It came out in May 2024, it's short and sweet, it's a perfect palate cleanser after RE9's intensity. Don't sleep on this one. This is the most direct Resident Evil tribute on this list, and somehow almost nobody talks about it. A team of police officers is sent into a zombie-infested mansion. That's it, that's the pitch. But the twist is that when your character dies, and they will, the story doesn't end. You switch to the next surviving officer. The mansion remembers what happened, items carry over, the zombies you already killed stay dead. It turns the classic survive the mansion formula into something with actual consequence, because every death costs you a teammate. The top-down exploration sections play like a love letter to the original Resident Evil, but when you enter combat, the perspective shifts to first person for this tense, close-range encounters. It came out in late 2023, it's short, maybe 5 to 6 hours, and its laser focus on doing one thing well. Way too many games called it a fascinating twist on the survival horror genre. If you've been craving pure mansion crawl dread after RE9, this is the move. What if Resident Evil was set in World War I? That's Conscript. You play as a French soldier named Andre during the Battle of Verdun in 1916, and you're searching the trenches for your missing brother. The survival horror mechanics are textbook RE, limited inventory slots, item boxes, typewriter saves, resource scarcity, and puzzles that gate your progress. But instead of zombies, your enemies are enemy soldiers, and instead of a mansion, you're navigating the most horrific battlefield in human history. It was made by a solo developer named Jordan Mochi, who spent 7 years building it. 7 years! The pixel art is gorgeous, the combat is tense and deliberate, and the atmosphere of gas-filled trenches and collapsed tunnels creates this suffocating dread that's unlike anything else in the genre. Forbes called it World War I survival horror at its finest. It launched in July 2024, it's on every platform, and if you want Leon's combat tension with a single supernatural element, Conscript is the one. Imagine if RE9's combat took place in a haunted 1920s mansion full of killer puppets, and also the whole game looked like it was running on a PlayStation 1. That's Alisa. You play as a royal agent chasing a thief into a bizarre Victorian mansion, and what follows is pure classic survival horror with tank controls, fixed camera angles, limited ammo, and some of the most creative enemy designs I've seen in an indie. Marionettes that lunge at you, dolls that split apart and crawl, giant mechanic insects. Every room has something new trying to kill you, and the combat, while intentionally clunky in that PS1 way, is satisfying once you lock in. If you're the kind of RE fan who misses the jank, the challenge, and the weirdness of a PS1 era, Alisa delivers all three. This game has the most Resident Evil origin story possible. The developers literally started by making an unofficial Resident Evil 2 fan remake, and when Capcom announced the official one, they pivoted and turned their work into an original game. Daymare 1998 is a third-person survival horror with 3 playable characters. A viral outbreak in a small town, helicopter crashes, underground labs, and zombie-adjacent enemies called caster soldiers. It wears its RE influence on its sleeve. The combat is over-the-shoulder shooting with a unique reload system where you juggle fast reloads and slow reloads to manage your magazine, which adds this layer of tension that most shooters don't have. Now, I'll be honest, it's janky, the voice acting is rough, the animations are stiff, and some of the puzzles are unnecessarily convoluted, but the moment-to-moment gameplay scratches that exact itch of I have 8 bullets and there's 4 enemies between me and the save point. It came out in 2019, it's usually dirt cheap on sale, and for RE fans who don't mind some rough edges, is a hidden gem in the truest sense. There's also a prequel called Daymare 1994 Sandcastle if you want more. Last one, and this is the wildcard pick. Painted in Blood is a first-person horror shooter that throws you into a nightmare world of a tortured artist. Think Resident Evil's atmosphere meets boomer shooter combat, fast movement, punchy weapons, grotesque enemies charging you at every angle, but draped in this surreal, oil-painted art style that makes every room look like a fever dream. It's currently in early access on Steam. The first chapter dropped in October 2025 and it was immediately labelled one of the best horror FPS games of the year. The shooting is satisfying, the environments are dripping with dread, and the enemy designs are actually disturbing. If Leon's action-heavy sections in RE9 were your favourite part, but you wish they leaned even harder into combat, Painted in Blood is the logical next step. Keep this one on your radar because it's only going to get better. 10 games, not a single AAA blockbuster among them. Every one of them made by small teams or solo developers who clearly grew up loving the same games we did. RE9 proves that survival horror and action horror can coexist in one game. These 10 prove that indie developers have been doing both, sometimes better, for years. Drop a comment and tell me which one you're playing first. And if you want more hidden games, subscribe because I've got a lot more where these came from.